Parade of storms continues in the west, and a little parade of weaker storm systems moving through the east. We are going to be talking about those, both the major and the minor, tonight, the weekend, and the long range. And for you snow lovers who are standing on the edge of a cliff because the snow window has been shut for you so far in many areas, well, it might have opened a tiny crack, just ever so small, maybe a tiny crack. We'll talk about it all tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which, of course, as always, is brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware, 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in
West Babylon
New York, in Southwest Suffolk
County,
serving the entire New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, tri-state area because they are Long Island's largest supplier of
rock salt,
and
mulch, if you're doing anything in the summertime, snow blowers.
Well, first there's mag, ice pellets, and flakes, and Pelledo, and yes, there
and
are
Pelledo, yes.
His and hers snow blowers, perhaps, and you also have batteries, flashlights to get you through those occasional power outages that like to show up every once in a while. 631-756-1125 is the phone number. Nowhere can you find better prices, and the website is
OmniTrueValue.com.
right.
Good evening,
and
Joe.
Good evening to you. This is to compensate for the fact that since we did a poll about your haircut earlier this week, I forgot the last two nights. Somebody mentioned the goatee, maybe you did. So tonight's poll is, look, and I'm going to tell you right now, if shaving it wins, I'm not shaving it. Okay, so this poll is a non-binding poll, and we'll leave it at that. So, not too many nights ago, and I bring this up because it's amazing. In the most dire of pattern, everybody's glued to every model run, and of course, sure, eyebrows were raised today with the Europeans run. But I do want to just go back, touch on something you said back a number of days ago, talking about the winter of 2016. There was the pattern overall that was a super El Nino year. There wasn't very much snow that fell from December into January. I don't know how similar the patterns are, other than the fact that in that particular year, California basically got 5 years worth of rain as storm after storm after storm was coming in. So that part of it is probably similar. But a window of opportunity opened up that lasted about a week and a half or so in the middle part of January, which resulted in a big snowstorm in the east. I'm not saying that that's going to happen again, but I just want to make the point that even in the most unfavorable and even the most unfavorable weather pattern for snow in the Northeast, which clearly you can't get more unfavorable than what we've been in for most areas, not all. Even as dire as it looks for snow lovers, a window does open up at some point somewhere, most of the time, and maybe, and I say that with big quotation marks around it, Joe. Maybe a window opens up later next week, but a lot has to happen for that to happen the way the European model pictured it for everybody today.
You know, I had said when I looked at a couple of local newscasts tonight, and on the local newscast there were two weather forecasters. I am not going to mention their names, nor am I going to mention their respective affiliations, but both of them spent more than a reasonable amount of time talking about the possibility of a nor'easter, a significant nor'easter, affecting our area, our part of the country, for Sunday. Not this Sunday, of course, but
next weekend.
The 15th of January. And I'm watching this, and I'm saying to myself, well, gee, if you're going to go that far ahead, why don't you do the weather for Groundhog Day or for Easter or for President's Day weekend or whatever. You want to go all the way out that far ahead? I mean, what was the sense of that? They were talking about an event. They were talking about a possible major kind of system 10 days in advance.
Yeah.
And we know that it's hard enough for these models sometimes to pin something down more than 5 or 6 days in advance. And here they're telling us, but Joe, it wasn't just a matter of saying something like he said, and we may have something to talk about maybe later next week or not this weekend, but the following weekend. That the two of them, again, I'm not going to mention which people I'm talking about, but the two of them spending more than ample time on showing you the setup and showing you and explaining everything. And they were talking as if this thing was coming this weekend or this Saturday or Sunday. And it just blows my mind that they did something like that. Yes, I agree. There is something possible in the cards for us, maybe at the end of next week or the following weekend. But don't spend so much time on it. Now, people are going to be walking around tomorrow or spending time in front of the water cooler saying, hey, I heard blah, blah, say that there could be a big storm, not this weekend, but next weekend.
Yeah.
It blows my mind.
It's so hard. It's so hard to give context when you only have a minute and a half.
Yes.
I sympathize with the weather person who wants to maybe throw something out there in the long range, but yeah, to spend anything more than on a TV show, anything more than just a passing reference to maybe something down the road in a very generic sense. But I don't, come already on at 10, 9, 10 days ahead of time and talking nor'easter is a bit much. I mean, at least here, we go as long as we want. We show the models, we give everything context, we explain what's going on in the atmosphere and why something could happen or it might not happen. At least that's where we are at this point. In a way, it kind of reminds me of 2016 in that, as I said at the beginning of this, was the fact that a little window opens up even in the most dire of patterns, and maybe that's what's happening. But just to let everybody know, and I just make this very clear. All right, if you looked at the European literally, it would be quite interesting, all the way up. Not actually, Joe. It's more interesting for me because the European gave me over a foot of snow here in Northeast Georgia, and it gave, put 2 feet numbers in North Carolina. I mean, that's a model. That's what the model generated. It's meaningless at this point, but in a way, it does kind of remind me of what happened in 2016. So in terms of how it might evolve. But other than that, there's really not much more we can say about it. I can say, however, that we have our first super chat hit of tonight, which is David Fuller. Thank you, and he says, "Great day." He hopes we had a great day. I actually did not have a great day. I love this show. I also love the help you've given me in the past with my questions. More than happy to do that, David. And anybody else who has any questions, you could always put it on the chat board, which is open to all. Just all you need to do is subscribe to my YouTube channel, and you can get on board and become part of the conversation. Maybe be the subject of the conversation. I don't know. But anyway, Joe and I are on Monday through Thursday at 7:35 and Sundays at 11 a.m. Fridays and Saturdays we're off because we need 2 days to kind of clear our brains. So in the meantime, we've got some weather going on. By the way, the mayor apparently, Joe, CPC putting up a risk area for the West for storminess and heavy rains in their long range wasn't enough. WPC putting 10 to 15 inch rainfall amounts for California apparently wasn't enough. The local forecast offices in California, and there are several, putting up all sorts of watches and warnings of many different types of watches and warnings, apparently wasn't enough because the mayor of San Francisco blamed the weather service, saying that he was not warned that there was going to be there was going to be big storms and heavy rains in San Francisco.
Oh, Lordy. They really do follow a playbook, don't they? Every single politician follows the same playbook.
Yep.
When the weather goes bad, when the weather gets out of control, when there are problems on roadways and thoroughfares, when people complain about not being able to get home or losing power, what does the local politician do? Well, it's the local TV weather, the local weathercaster's fault. They didn't tell us it was going to be this bad. Yeah, that's the local. That's the local play. They must, before they become politicians, before they start to run for some office, they all must gather at some kind of a college or school or university to learn the tricks of the trade. And this is the one that has been going for too many years now. I mean, they're going to have Governor Murphy from New Jersey come in to act as an adjunct and teach these young politicians how to do it. But but it just gets me. It's so annoying, so annoying.
Well, you know, Joe, really, if it just boils down to one simple fact. I mean, if
yes.
all these weather offices and all these weather people in California failed the dear mayor, all he had to do was tune in to the Joe and Joe show.
Exactly.
Monday through Thursday at 7:35 and Sundays at 11 a.m. and Fridays and Saturdays when there are storms around. Because had he tuned into the Joe and Joe weather show over the last 2 weeks at those times, which I won't repeat a second time to make the joke worse, he would have been certainly warned. So I would certainly advise the mayor that he should put us on his, include us in his already impressive schedule and make time for us. Don't you agree?
It's crazy.
Oh, I know.
I agree.
We don't have an advocacy group, Joe. They could throw us under the bus. Who's going to stand up for us except ourselves? So at the end of the day, we know what the truth is. Okay.
And I mean, like every week I saw on the national news, well, Lake Mead is down 5% more, and what is turning out to be a record in terms of the lack or paucity of rain and lack of rainfall for the range. I said, when was the last time? Why don't you tell us how much Lake Mead has now? I mean,
Well, apparently, I did see something to the effect of there are some dams that are now, are that are on the verge of busting if they get any more rain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it only makes news when it's dried down to a puddle. Okay.
When it bleeds, it leads. That's the we knew about it. We've learned about it when we were doing when we were with the media and on television. We learned all about this, and now as I said the other night, be careful what you wish for. These people in the southwestern states, especially California, begging and saying like that, we need the water, we need the reservoirs. If they don't fill up soon, we're not going to have any water. And now you got your water. Maybe a little bit too much, maybe excessive, but you got your water. This is what you needed, didn't you? I noticed, Joe, on the drought map, which was revised today, that there was a long strip in the middle of California that still had extreme drought conditions. They have now lowered that one category now to just severe.
I was going to say not so extreme.
Not so extreme. I mean, it's still dry in parts of California, admittedly, because it's going to take a while to moisten. But still, the drought is the horrendous drought conditions that we saw over the summer are being alleviated. Now, who knows if this continues for another? And now the next question is. The next question is, what exactly are we into right now? It certainly is not a La Nina pattern anymore. Is it really a La Nada pattern or a neutral pattern? Or maybe we just went right from a La Nina to an El Nino.
Yeah, but there's if you look at the water temperatures, Joe, it's still a La Nina out there. The water temperatures have not all of a sudden flipped to above normal out in the equatorial Pacific. They're all below normal. We showed the map 2 nights ago.
But you see, Joe, the thing is that, they arbitrarily, they being the NOAA climatologists, the ones who make these, the ones at the Climate Prediction Center make these long range predictions. They just arbitrarily say, okay, we're in a La Nina pattern, so it's going to be dry in the west. It'll be cold and
Wrong. Dry in
somewhat
the
snowy.
West was wrong.
Wrong.
Okay.
Yeah,
Dry,
exactly.
dry in the West
Exactly.
was wrong. Dry in the South was wrong. We had 5 inches. My friends who have rain gauges, because shame on me, I don't have a rain gauge, but unfortunately I've got woods, so I don't have any open area that I could put a rain gauge in. But everybody has rain gauges here, believe it or not, and my friends all had between 4.5 and 5 inches of rain in the last 2 days. And we've had a fair amount of rain. So it's supposed to be the La Nina pattern usually means it's drier down here in the south. Well, that ain't the case. Not this time around either. So there's a lot of things here that are different. And again, I go to the idea that yeah, there's a La Nina, but there's also a polar vortex in the stratosphere that's doing its thing, and there are things going on elsewhere. If you want to bring up the Madden-Julian oscillation, because everybody seems to want to oscillate, but I mean, there's a lot of things that go on in the atmosphere. It's not just one thing. So Keith James the second, Joe wants to know why is it that in the wintertime, when there are warmish days, it's often associated with fog. And I'll just say that in the wintertime, usually it's because uh, when we have warmer than normal temperatures, normally it's due to the fact that we're in some kind of ridge position, which means that we're in a stable air mass, and that often leads to, and the long nights in a stable air mass often lead to inversions, and you wind up getting fog. That's the easy answer.
And
Yep.
the other answer, which doesn't qualify now because there isn't any, is that usually even when there's a little snow cover on the ground, that unusually warm air mass passing over the snow usually ends up, number one, erasing the snow. Ultimately, fog loves to, get rid of snow real fast, but also as the warm air is riding over that surface of much cooler air, you end up getting condensation, you end up getting some fog. We don't have that explanation, however, because there ain't no snow. That's and believe me, I've heard from more than a few snow lovers out there in recent days asking, begging, pleading, when are we going to get cold enough? When are we going to have a storm that'll bring us some snow? And as we started off the show tonight, Joe again mentioned that the door will
The
open
window.
a
The
open a little
window.
bit. The window. Oh, the window will open a little bit, not this weekend, but next weekend. And indeed, two local weathercasters also mentioned that there is that possibility of something, a significant nor'easter. In fact, in one, I love they show it to you, and they sometimes like 100 hours out, they start giving you numbers on possible snow accumulations, and I'm saying, please don't do this. Don't. Ah.
They were already. They weren't doing that, were they?
No, they were. Well, first of all, I don't think any of the models do any of the models give. Um, well, I know they
Oh
do.
yeah,
Yeah,
no.
they
Well, the,
do.
the
They'll
European.
give you accumulations or whatever.
I'll show everybody because it's not a huge secret. Anybody who wants to see a weather snow map can find one. I will show it and put it in context in a moment. But while we're at it, by the way, good question, Keith. And again, anybody who has any questions, by all means, share it on the chat board. And Joe Rayo monitors the chat board like glue, and he'll bring it up. And on that note, let's the watches and warnings map tonight from the Weather Service is actually relatively quiet, except for what's going on in California. In case the mayor doesn't know, actually, you know what we should do, Joe?
Write him a
I
letter.
No, I think what we're gonna do is I'm bringing up the San Francisco Weather Office, and I will punch up San Francisco, and just to let him know, there's a flood warning. Just if he doesn't know and wasn't warned, there is a flood warning that's up until 6:45 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for areas around San Francisco. And in case he wants to see what's going on elsewhere, there's dark greens are We have got flash flood. Is it flash flood or flood watches? We have flood watches up. We also have in the darker green near the coast, we have high surf warnings in effect, along with other areas with high surf advisories that are in effect. In the pink in the east, of course, and that's in the Sierra Nevadas. We have winter storm warnings all over the place there, and there's also various high wind watches up. So he is pretty much up to date now, thanks to the Joe and Joe Weather Show. And we also have some winter storm warnings up and down the middle of Utah from north to south, and a few advisories in a couple of counties in Nevada and also in northwest Colorado. Also, except for the western counties of Massachusetts, much of central and eastern Massachusetts, Joe, is under winter weather advisories tonight. That's all from the Boston office, and they're forecasting anywhere from 1 to maybe as much as 2 or 3 inches in some places of some wet snow overnight into tomorrow morning. I was looking at some of the temperatures here. They're in the mid 30s. So if precip does, which it will probably overnight into tomorrow morning when precip develops and kind of cools the column down, there could be some white snow and maybe a slushy couple of inches. I would think the roads would probably stay wet. It's not like it's going to be snowing at 2 or 3 inches an hour, but you might see some snow, and you might also see it if you go into northwest Connecticut or northeast Connecticut, and maybe northwest Rhode Island might see a coating to maybe as much as an inch of snow. Again, I would think it probably wouldn't be on road surfaces, and you can see that upstate New York and back through the western half of Pennsylvania, anywhere from a coating to a couple of inches. Also up in New England. This is through Sunday evening, by the way. Also showing maybe a coating to a couple of inches for Vermont, New Hampshire, and for Maine. And we can go out west and just take a look because we are gluttons for punishment here. You can see the big snowfall amounts. Trying to see if I can see any big numbers. I still see that 52 and a 25. So very right all along the whole range there of the Sierra Nevadas just continues to get clobbered with big snow amounts. And further inland, running up and down the middle of Utah, which goes right through Salt Lake City, by the way, there are bands of several to 6 inches being indicated, narrow bands of several to 6 inches. I think that's Route 15, Interstate 15 that runs north to south in Utah. So snow for that area, and then you start to move up into the northwest, into the Cascades. There's a 41 number there, but other than that, everybody else is a coating to a couple of inches. So it's the big stuff's really confined to the mountains in California.
Yeah, and that seems to be where all the news is going to be for at least the next week or so, Joe. Again, there may be some slight changes or some changes locally in the pattern here by late next week, or not this weekend, but the following weekend. But it looks like, for the most part, rather quiet conditions and rather mild conditions. Well, maybe not mild in the set. I mean, like the normal high now is in the upper 30s. We will get there, upper 30s, probably toward the end of next week or the following weekend. But there's really not much to talk about in this part of the country, especially after we get past this little bump in the road tonight, tomorrow. I think we're going to start seeing a little bit of clearing move in. Late in the day, we might end up with a little bit of sunshine. Saturday looks like a kind of a sunny to partly cloudy day. Sunday looks glorious. Lots of blue sky and bright sun. And again, next week, for the most part, what are you going to talk about? It's not much in the way of weather here.
Oh, we'll figure it out. Here's the West Coast satellite. The current storm system is now moving northward off the coast of Washington and Oregon. And we talked yesterday about that big arm of precip that came in, and that had pushed in earlier, and now they're getting some more that's coming around the deep upper trough. But to take a look out to the west of them, and here comes the next one, and there's even some lightning strikes, Joe, in there in the next weather system that is coming eastward, and then right behind that is yet another one It's just an absolute parade of systems that just continues to barrel into the West Coast, and particularly into California, bringing all this rain. And they are far from done because this is going to go on into the middle part of next week.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like a conveyor belt, one after another after another.
And the rest of the U.S., as we take a look, we a lot of clouds kind of hung on along the coast. That frontal boundary offshore didn't really push all the far enough out. It did clear up a bit across Pennsylvania and parts of upstate New York and the Catskills, but there was lingering clouds for a good part of the day, particularly in New England. And you see the rotation around the Great Lakes. So that's the upper trough that's about to swing eastward, and that's why Boston's got their winter weather advisories that they've put up. There's the front lies right across Florida, the southern half not too shabby. On the northern side, it's a little just clouds and a little cooler. And of course, we had a gorgeous day here in the southeast, beautiful blue skies and sunshine, and temperatures that, at least by me, made it up into the low 50s, and nice weather across the Gulf states, which is a welcome change. Here's the radar tonight, and there are some showers on the radar showing up now in Maryland and in eastern Pennsylvania. They're moving northeastward, and this is some of the precip with this weak system that's coming through tonight into tomorrow. And then, of course, you've got the upper trough over the Great Lakes that's swinging east. There's no, there's nothing here that would cause this to intensify. This is the features here in the upper atmosphere. The upper feature is, I wouldn't say the upper feature is weak, but there's not much for this to work on because the front that came through just pretty much zapped all the moisture and energy out of the atmosphere. So what's available is kind of limited.
Yeah, not much to work with.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. So widening out, we go out west, and the rain's kind of subsided a little bit along the coast in California. You can see the heavy snow that's lined up now into the Sierra Nevadas, also in Utah, northwestern Arizona, northeastern parts of Nevada, on up into southern Idaho, and we've got some rain coming in there to the Pacific Northwest, and there's some light snows going on in and around Michigan, and up and down into northern Indiana and parts of northern Ohio as that system starts to push to the east. So as far as probabilities go, as we'll check out the 7-day liquid precip amounts, not a whole heck of a lot here. They got a little dot of a half an inch there, right near you, for some reason. I don't know how can you see it on the map?
I don't see it.
There's a little on the 7-day totals. There's this tiny little. Let me see if I can make it a little bigger. These guys are good at the WPC. I mean, yeah, right there, Joe. There's a little patch of blue that looks like it runs just near you, and then cuts off near Poughkeepsie. It's so small, but it's there. Otherwise, it's a quarter of an inch in the darker green, a tenth of an inch in the next lighter green, and in the very light green, it's only a couple of hundred. So we're not looking at a lot of precip up and down the coastal plain. There's a stripe here of 3/4 of an inch to an inch and a half from East Texas northeastward into eastern Tennessee. And for the umpteenth day in a row, it's 5 to 10 inches of rain or more for much of California, although it's tailed off a little bit to the south, but still another inch to maybe an inch and a quarter down to about San Diego. And in and around San Francisco, that color is I think that's the 10-inch. Yeah, that's the 10-inch plus area, which is just north of San Francisco and also in the Sierra Nevadas. By the way, they're going to lose some of the cold air in the Sierra Nevadas with with one of these storms, that they may actually get rain after all the snow that they've gotten this week in some places. They may actually get rain on top of it, and then I think the one behind it for early next week, I think that one it'll be a little colder, and they'll wind up getting some more snow on top of it. But I find it difficult to imagine that you could wash away 100 inches of rain. You know, I would think that's kind of tough.
I would think so too. We have a question from Tyler Fengya, Joe C., and Joe R. Just a couple of questions that came to mind. Does the atmosphere thicken at night from radiational cooling? And also, how does the Pacific jet relate to the subtropical and the subtropical slash polar jet? But first off, the air does indeed thicken in a radiational cooling situation as the air cools. Fog will form sometimes at or near the surface, and the layer of fog will also deepen or thicken overnight as the air above the initial cold layer settles down. If the wind is relatively calm, the layer in contact with the cooling ground gradually thickens. And it's a relatively slow process. I mean, you don't have radiation fog, for example, occur just like that. It takes time over many hours, but yeah, it does. As far as the Pacific jet relating to the subtropical or polar jet, well, now we're talking about different types of, oh, I hate using this term, atmospheric rivers. There are different rivers out there, Joe.
I knew you'd give
I mean,
in.
do you agree or?
Yeah, I guess so. There's different types of atmospheric rivers. Yeah, I
Just in case you still hear me, put my headphones on, hanging, my battery, and headphone. I will just plug this in.
all right. Well, let's see how this goes.
Good. And so now we can continue.
Except that we can barely hear you.
Well, now you can hear me, right?
Now I hear you.
Right, because I'm near the microphone, or my lips, my mouth is near the microphone. But anyway,
Go on. You were saying.
no, I'm just saying I had to recharge, and so now it's charging.
Oh, did you
While
finish?
I'm still,
Did you finish answering the question?
oh, about the Pacific jet relating to the subtropical and polar jet. Yeah, there's a relationship. The relationship is that the Earth doesn't have one singular jet stream; it has several. One is primarily transporting cold air across the northern portion of our globe, and then there's the subtropical jet, which deals with high pressure, usually in the 20 or 30-degree latitude zone of the north, and that transports air across the southern sections of the United States. It is what we call the subtropical jet, and sometimes you have one jet delivering very cold air, or sometimes the one river, if you will, delivering cold air when the other river, with subtropical moisture, is moving along. They can coalesce and produce big storms and sometimes big snowstorms, although that does not appear to be in the cards in the immediate future. Maybe we'll see something in about 8, 9, 10 days. Maybe.
WPC has gotten the 2-inch or more probabilities up for New England, and you can see there's a few areas there in Vermont, New Hampshire, and also in southwestern New York and northwest PA, where there's a 50% chance of at least 2 inches between tonight going into Sunday night. And of course, out in the west, it continues to be busy, although it's a little less busy than it was yesterday. You can see where the highest probabilities of snow are, and are a little more limited than what we've been experiencing lately. Now, the interesting thing to me about the long range is, and I'll be really curious to see what WPC does tonight, because they would have looked at the date. I've noticed, Joe, that on their long range, they tend to lean to the European in terms of what they're forecasting, and I'll be curious to see if they start showing some hints of, at the very end of the forecast period, because the forecast period will be Tuesday through Friday of next week. If they start showing hints of what maybe the European was indicating on their Friday forecast, it'll give us at least an idea of what they're thinking. And you can see out in the west on Monday, there's not a whole lot going on here. Monday, Tuesday, it's all out in the west. Wednesday and into Thursday, actually a little patch appears up in northern Maine actually it's outside of northern Maine. It's in New Brunswick where there's a 10 to 30% chance for at least 3. So let's do the short range first, and then we'll talk about what's going on down the road. So tonight, of course, as we said, we've got this weak system. The old front offshore, there's a low that's south of Nova Scotia, very weak. There's some snow up in northern Maine, and there's this precip that's gelling up that we saw on the radar. And that comes into contact with a little bit of cooler air as that upper trough swings in. So you see a change to a bit of snow here overnight into tomorrow morning, and then it pulls out later in the afternoon. Again, maybe northern Connecticut, maybe up, certainly even in Massachusetts, some places there'll be a coating to perhaps a slushy inch or two, and then that goes out. Weather improves on Saturday in general. There's another weak low, though, that's coming out of the plains, and that's moving east, and you see it here. By Sunday afternoon, there's some sleet being indicated in parts of West Virginia. Otherwise, it's a chilly rain in the rest of West Virginia and into Kentucky. That low moves east. Now, depending on what model you look at, the GFS seems to have another area of weak precip. Some of the models have less and the GFS isn't really showing very much. And then it moves over New Jersey and Long Island, and then just kind of slides out. So this is a minor event. Maybe some elevated areas in northern New Jersey, northeastern Pennsylvania, and up in the Catskills could see some wet snow in the mix here Monday morning with this next week system, and that goes out. Now, let's look at Wednesday, because if you think yesterday when we were talking about, Joe, how the GFS was on one run, was doing something with a storm for next Wednesday, and I drove a stake through the heart of that storm, that it was not going to be an issue, and that certainly remains the case. You see the low moving off the southeast coast. It moves out straight to the east and goodbye. Meanwhile, there's a cold front that comes through in the north, and with it there is a cold high. You see the cold high here, trying to move southeastward as this low goes out to the east. Now, this low here is going to be very important in terms of how things come out for the end of next week, and this is where we start to get into the model arguments between the European and the Icon on one side, and the GFS and the Canadian on the other, if you want to look at it that way. So I'm going to put up the GFS map, and this is the Atlantic view, because what's really going to hold the key to what happens here is going to be what transpires up across eastern and central Canada. That is going to be the main player with regards to whether the European is right or the other models, which are not really doing very much other than rain, are going to be right. So,
right.
All right. So,
but it's what we've said. We've said this so many times before, Joe. When people start looking all the way out, let's say 10 days in advance, and there's another system that comes between now and that 10-day storm, as you're pointing out here correctly, whatever is going to happen with the 10-day storm is going to depend highly on what is going to happen with the storm that happened several days earlier.
Right.
That's going to be.
This is the one on in the middle of next week is going to determine whether the one behind it is going to be a problem or not.
Right.
And there's no way you're going to know this now.
No, I mean, you're just making the assumption that you take everything at face value. You're going to assume that the storm middle of next week is going to do what the models are saying it's going to do now. And then the models are saying, okay, if we assume that that's going to happen, then as this system pulls out, the next storm, the one that we're talking about for not this weekend but next weekend, is going to react relative to the previous storm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you don't know.
No, we don't know. But I'm just going to illustrate the differences and what we should be looking for in terms of how this is all going to evolve. And by the way, there's a nice parade of storms here out in the Atlantic. The one that's coming out on Monday. Well, first of all, we have the one for tonight, and that runs up toward Greenland. The one coming out Monday strengthens as it moves northeast through the Atlantic. Then you got the one Wednesday, and there they are. There's three of them. One, two, three. And so let's look at what the GFS does with this. So the GFS takes this Atlantic storm and just sort of moves it on its merry way. Then then the next one follows for late next week into next weekend, where you got a primary that goes into Indiana, redevelops down in North Carolina, and you get a coastal low that sort of lifts northward and wind up. By the way, I'm not. I can't. This map view does not show precip type. Okay, so it doesn't. It's not. You're not. That green that you see up in New England is actually more snow than anything else. But this is what happens. This is what's happening in terms of the GFS. That high comes down into eastern Canada. We get some colder air, not especially cold. The low levels might get cold for a day or so, but the high comes down and just sort of goes out, goes out and goodbye.
Right.
All right.
Right.
So now let's look at the European. All right. The European does something it's a very important difference in the European, and that's why I've been singling out what's going on in Canada as being the most important thing to watch here, how this over the coming days. So this is the European. Here's Monday's low goes out, and you see it run out to the northeast. Now here comes the Wednesday low, which pops up off the North Carolina coast. Now here's the difference, Joe. And now you see also that big highs coming down. The difference here is that low, instead of going out across the Atlantic to sort of keep the train moving, that winds up going up toward Nova Scotia and becoming a 955 low. Okay? And inevitably what that does is it traps the high. There's a 1040 high at James Bay in between the 955 low that's southeast of Nova Scotia and then the new system, which is now sitting in northwestern Mississippi. That has to happen. If that low that on Wednesday, if it goes up, it becomes a major storm near Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, that's going to create a blocky scenario. It's not
Right.
but it creates a blocky scenario where the third system, which is for the end of next week, gets forced southward. Look how far the low is. It's on the Florida Panhandle, and then it's off the North Carolina coast, and the high is forced to basically banana around it. And it is going to be cold enough. I was looking at the 850 especially is very cold. The zero goes all the way down into South Carolina and down to the Florida Panhandle with this thing. And the 540 is way south. So it was kind of interesting to see that. Now it only goes out to 240. I will tell you that the ensembles gave about a half to three-quarters of an inch all the way up to Boston, which I thought was interesting. But again, what happens that low on Wednesday is going to hold the key to all this. If it does what the European says it's going to do, then we may have a shot here to see some snow at the end of next week, even at the coast, because
Right.
that's a cold high. I'll go a little closer here. I mean, you take a look at here. Look at the gradient in New England. I mean, that's a north-northeast. That's a north wind down the Hudson Valley around to the east of that 1040 high. The low levels could get pretty cold out of this, and the upper air, because I think it's important that we look at the upper air, because that is also another place where, obviously if the surfaces are different, the upper air is going to be different. But here's the European. You can watch these troughs as they move through. So here's Monday's system gets kicked out and goes on. The shortwave moves out. The second trough dives into Virginia, North Carolina, and then it's got this arm that comes down in the north from Quebec that phases with it and makes this big storm south of Newfoundland. And then you see what happens with the third feature, and it's got no place to go but just kind of come off the Atlantic coast and either slide northeastward or get kicked east northeast. It's hard to say. But the GFS, on the other hand, uh, it has a whole different look because of the fact that it doesn't have that upper low, that big storm at Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. It just kicks the Wednesday storm out almost straight east of Bermuda and goodbye. So that's what we're going to pay attention to. What's going to happen in Canada is going to in Eastern Canada is going to ultimately determine whether we get something at the end of the next week in terms of snow or not.
Well, you know what could happen, Joe, and you have said this many times before, that when you look at a long range model that's forecasting something 10 days in advance, you know one thing, and one thing that is almost a certainty. What you see on that map 10 days in advance is rarely ever going to match the actual date in question. So in this situation, one of two things is likely to happen with this storm. And either it's going to go off to our south and just barely miss us and maybe bury parts of, dare I say, North Carolina or Virginia with lots of snow and break the hearts.
I got the snow map up today. This is the European snow map off of what it did today, folks. Okay?
Right.
Just to give it some context.
So it's going to break the heart of everybody, all the snow lovers who live up here, seeing what's going on down there, or the storm strengthens even more radically or more rapidly than suggested and takes a track inland up along, let's say, the Appalachians.
Which is what the GFS did today.
And that would suggest le rain, not le snow.
Well, the only thing I will say is, here's the GFS. This was the 18Z. You can see on the 18Z, it's still nowhere, it's still different from the European. The 18Z is a rain event, and even up in New England, it would change to rain all the way up because of the fact that the high doesn't hold in. The European scenario allows that cold high to just banana itself around the low.
Right.
It's interesting that
that by the way is a new term I've never heard you use before. Banana around
the banana high.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've actually seen a banana high.
Okay.
But look, there's a very high probability that the next run, what the European did on this run, would be gone on the next run. The only thing is, it's been at least, just to go back. Yeah, let me go back to this point. This is Tuesday. The last 4 or 5 runs, which didn't get into range, have been kind of hinting at what the European did today. So there has been a degree of consistency with what this model's been doing. So I'm certainly not going to discount it. The only thing is, what would be a little bit extraordinary, because it hasn't happened so far this winter season, is we really haven't seen any big deepening lows going up to Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. So this would be a first. So it's kind of out of character for the patterns that we've been in.
Well,
so far this winter, to see a storm that strong south of Nova Scotia and Newfoundland.
Well, you know what? We could talk about this for the next 2 days or 2 hours. We're really not going to know.
No, we're not going to know anything
until the middle or latter part. But I do want to circle back to what was being posted on the chat when we were talking about 10 or 15 minutes ago about how the mayor of San Francisco has been complaining that the National Weather Service did a lousy job and didn't alert everybody about this. Now, first of all, I don't know if you're aware of this. I just learned about this now because I did a little check on Wikipedia, whatever. The mayor of San Francisco happens to be a woman, who took over for the previous mayor who died while in office. Her name is London Breed, Breed. Now, again, I have not. I'm taking the word of the folks on the chat board saying that she complained bitterly about the fact that all of the stuff that's going on in San Francisco and that they were not aware, they were not told, or they were not given any kind of warning about this. Now, that having been said, now this is what? This is Thursday night, January 5th. I'd like to read to you, Joe, the area forecast discussion put out by the National Weather Service in San Francisco at 10:54 p.m. Pacific time on Monday. That's 3 days ago, Monday, January 2nd. Okay? In the discussion, the forecaster on duty, who is this forecaster, by the way? Let's just run down the list here. It doesn't, it just gives initials. So I don't know who wrote this, but this forecaster on this discussion on Monday night, 3 days ago, said, I am going to let the words of my colleague stand below in the previous discussion. So in other words, the discussion that he is quoting or making standing alone actually was placed online quite a number of hours beforehand. And he said, please read it if you haven't already, which is obvious to me that the mayor didn't read it. Utilize tomorrow, January 3rd, Tuesday, as your last full day to prep ahead of the storm due to hit us January 4 and 5. Here's a list of things to plan for and to think about. 1, make sure you're signed up for your county's emergency alerts and or their reverse 911 calls. Heed all evacuation orders, especially if you live near an area that is prone to or flooding or mudslides. 2, have a go bag ready in case you need to evacuate quickly. Go to ready.gov/plan or ready.gov/kit if you're not sure what to pack. 3, find your insurance policies and other important documents. Take photos of your room so that you can easily reference items in case you suffer damage. 4, prepare for power outages and road closures that could last for several days. Get extra non-perishable food and have drinking water ready at home in case you're unable to leave home. 5, make sure your vehicle is gassed up and charge up all of your devices. And 6, plan ahead for the elderly and others with special needs, such as necessary medications and other services. Oh, and 7, don't, my goodness, this list goes on and on and on. I'm not even going to go down the rest of the list, but Mayor London, if you're listening or watching, you need to issue an apology to the National Weather Service, because I don't know what more they could have done to alert everybody, and especially you, a government official, for what was going to be heading your way 2 to 3 days down the road. This discussion tells it all, Joe. And no, they were not asleep. They did everything they could to warn people about how bad this storm is. And they headlined this with rain, wind, flood watch, high wind watch has been issued for later this week. I mean, it blows my mind that a government official points the finger at the National Weather Service and says, you people didn't do your job. You didn't tell us. You didn't alert us. And here I'm looking at a whole slew of things in a list issued by the National Weather Service 2 to 3 days in advance, telling everybody, watch it. This is going to be a major storm. Prepare for power outages. Help the elderly out. Take pictures of your rooms in your home so you can easily reference them in case you need to, go to your insurance company. What more could they possibly have done, Joe? What more could they have possibly have done?
Well, she could blame the weather people, or she could blame her staff.
No, she's not going to rate their staff.
They're not going to blame the staff. The politicians certainly not going to take asking a politician to take responsibility. When does that happen?
No, it doesn't.
When does that happen? So it's laughable. It really is laughable. Considering the fact that I'm sure the local media in San Francisco did their job days ago when this storm was coming,
Oh, I'm
and
sure
this
they did.
series of storms. So
You know, the news media,
it's not like
they
it was
love
some big
this.
secret.
I hate to say this. I hate to say this because it sounds like masochistic or whatever. But you know, as well as I, having been in the business all those years, this is great. If you're a TV news director or an executive producer, you're going to tell your anchor to lead with major storm coming, powerful storm. Watch out, the full details coming up. I'm sure. So it blows my mind that a government official says blame the National Weather Service, blame the weather forecasters. No, there's no need to blame anybody. To blame you, my dear. I don't know what the reason is why you're pointing the finger at the government weather service. They did their job better than more efficient. And in case any of you out there are doubting me and thinking that, oh, Rayo is making all this up, go to Google, go to the National Weather Service, San Francisco, and then where it says discussions, they have you could look at the latest version or you can click on the older version. And that's all I did. I kept clicking older version until came all the way back to Monday of this week just to see what they were saying more than a day or two in advance. And this is what I read to you just a few moments ago is verbatim what they were talking about. So
Right. Well, you know, she could have pulled a she could have pulled an Andrew Cuomo and she could have said, "We never had rains before. It never rains in California, and boy, they never warn you. It pours. Oh man,
yeah,
it pours."
Johnny Quest says Joe Cioffi and Joe Rayo, the National Weather Service, can email the discussion to the mayor,
What
and they would
matter?
still blame the National Weather
Yeah.
Service. And Mark G follows that up with the Joe rants are the highlight of my day.
Louis Arizio hitting super chat tonight. Thank you, Louis. Most appreciated. And we got over 100 likes, which on a Thursday night, we get toward the end of the week, the audience tends to thin a bit, especially on Fridays, because everybody's at happy hour. And, since all the action right now is in the West and the action in the East is only theoretical at best, that's kind of where we're at. By the way, the poll is uh, should Joe shave his goatee? And as I said on the poll, I'm not going to shave it, even if we're going to lose this. 32% said yes, 48% said no, and 20% said I should just grow a full beard. So I'm not going to grow a full beard. But I appreciate it. That means at least
Yep.
69% of you are good with my facial hair.
So you don't like you're not going to take the David Letterman route.
No, I'm not. And
how about instead of a goatee, Joe? How about a Van Dyke?
no,
You got the sideburns. The sideburns connect up with the beard.
No, that doesn't work. And, I'm happy with my goatee. This I still have brown hair in most of my goatee, which is odd because most of my hair now on top is now gone all gray. So, and that's only happened in the last year or two. And the other thing was, I didn't for some reason I slept till about 2:30 this morning and I woke up wide awake and I could not get back to sleep. So I've been up since a little bit before 3, and I did what any good Italian would do when they can't sleep and they get up early like I did. You make a pot of coffee and you start a pot of sauce, which is what I've been basically cooking all day. Was a pot of sauce with put a chuck roast in there and a full rack of baby back ribs, and I let the sauce boil for about 6 hours, and that was my breakfast, my lunch, and my dinner. So it was really good. But I think what's going to happen is after the show is over, I'm going straight to bed and just collapse.
Right. Well, I'm looking at the chat board here, and thank you all for that. A lot of people, Joe, are saying like they love when I go into a rant, and I don't really like doing rants. But this got me just so mad. And somebody said Renata should calm you down. Renata's not even here tonight. She's at her German club meeting, so she's not even here to Otherwise, she'd be down here already with a bucket of water to throw on top of me to cool me off.
Yeah. Well, it just gets tiresome. We do our we try to do the best we can. Actually,
And in fact,
Lewis,
our own governor,
yeah,
in the aftermath of Ida, if you remember last year, I threw
yeah.
a similar rant because Governor Hochul said, "Well, nobody told us that this was going to happen or whatever."
Was it
And that,
no? You mean Cuomo?
no,
After
Governor Hochul.
she wasn't governor
Last,
with Ida. What?
yeah, I think she was.
No.
Not this
Oh,
year or last year.
oh, was she?
Yeah, I believe so.
I don't remember.
And of course, naturally, in the aftermath of that, they all complained again about the weather service. And I said, why don't you people get off your duff and pass bills to fix the infrastructure? Because a lot of the infrastructure in and around New York, especially Manhattan, is so old that if indeed we're going to see more of these 3 and 4 inch in one shot storms, rainstorms in the summertime and flood everything out, nobody does anything. The only thing is they
No.
complain, and then again they have to turn around and point to me,
Oh,
you, all the other weathercasters.
yeah. The tire marks on our backs gets a little tiresome after a while, so I kind of
Yeah,
get it.
yeah,
We're here. If we say there's going to be a big, if we say there's going to be a big storm and we're fairly certain of it 3 or 4 days in advance, people will accuse you of hyping it. If you don't say it and something happens, then they accuse you of never having said anything at all. So, look, I've kind of figured out a long time ago. I know what the truth is. I know what I do. I have control over what I do. If I make a mistake, I'll admit it and then we move on. But
yes.
uh, you know, uh, everything else around me that's going on is a distraction. They know it's BS, and everybody knows it's BS. So on that lovely note, Lewis, in my house growing up as an Italian, it was actually because and when you make a tomato sauce with meat, it's actually called ragu, which unfortunately gets messed up with that product that they sell and the horrible commercials that go with it. The new commercial which says she cooks like a mother. Okay, every time I see it, I think there's a word missing from that sentence. And being a semi G-rated show, we're not going to say what that word is. But yeah, so it's ragu when it's a meat sauce. But in my house, we actually called it salsa, la salsa. So I know the whole gravy versus sauce. In my house, it was more the Italian word for sauce. So there you go.
I don't
And
remember. I don't remember. There was a commercial. I'm not even going to say how many years ago it was. It was very funny. It was the head of the pasta company or whatever like that, talking to his head chef, and the chef says to the guy, he said, "And now I'm going to create a new marinara sauce." And the guy says, "What do you mean you created a new marinara sauce?" And the chef says, "Marinara." And the guy says, "Next time you tell me the good news, call me up on the phone."
yeah,
I don't remember if it was Butoni or Ronzoni or whatever like that, but I don't even know if it's politically correct now to do something like that. But
yeah.
anyway,
Before we get into trouble, let's call it a night, and
yes.
we'll be back. We'll be back Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern time. So that'll give the models a couple of days to figure things out. I'm sure by Sunday we won't have it all figured out, but maybe we'll get lucky and we'll get a good handle on it. We'll see. So on that note, everybody have a great night. Thanks for the super chat hits, the 100+ likes, and we'll see you on Sunday at 11 a.m. Nighty night.
Nighty night, everyone. Au reservoir.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.